let's get started with the questions and answers. Can we get Mr. Gurmit, can you just step a bit? And Mr. Azlan Yaacob. Azlan, we need you. Come. Q&A. Yeah. Okay, let's have a quick Q&A session. I need to sit together, otherwise you'll be outside the camera. Yeah? Okay.
We don't let Peter ask any questions because then we'll be here forever.
Okay, anyone?
I just out of curiosity about river management. Okay, I can see there's a lot of rivers now is gone in Africa, everything. So in Malaysia, is it foreseeing that this will happen also?
It's going to be kind of hard to predict what's going to happen with the rivers in Malaysia. We know for sure that pollution is an issue. In Kedah recently, you heard about the Sungai Muda being drained. It happened for two reasons. Yeah, it's not just climate change. Somebody opened the gate and forgot it was open, so water got drained out. But the problem with climate change is the ability for us to predict weather models starts to reduce until we can't tell for sure. So the National Agency for Hydrological Studies in Malaysia, NAHRIM, they actually made this prediction about the dry weather in 2021. So we already knew that this was the period where it was going to be dry. It's coupled with the El Nino phenomenon, and it's exacerbated by climate instability. We should not have rivers running dry. Rivers here naturally have a threshold. You know, sometimes they're low, sometimes they're high. It's normal. The Larapinta in Australia, which is the world's oldest living river, it doesn't flow every day. So there are periods where it flows, and the rest of the year it's a dry riverbed. If you've been to the Middle Eastern countries, you would walk in dry riverbeds as well. So it's not unusual. What's more important relative to the rivers is the scarcity of water that can be treated for our use. You know? So I personally don't think that the rivers will dry up, but I think the amount of available water will be reduced, and then we will start having water shortages. And then the price of treated water will go up as well. And once the price of treated water goes up, just like petrol, the price of everything else will go up as well. Hope that answers.
No one else?
Okay, I would like to add something which it can be quite impossible, but we want to start the dialogue. So in our discussions with DBKL, we along the river of Kayu Ara, if you're familiar, it goes through Kampung Sungai Penchala. So we noticed that at the upstream, which starts at Maya Karin's house, so she has a house there. So what happened is that when it meanders, it goes through a lot of houses. And we know for a fact that a lot of the houses, a lot of the discharge from the sink, from the toilets, even the human related, go into that. So one of the discussion points that we will trigger is to make sure that every household is accountable for their discharge. So then we will offer solutions to households or along the river. So we've got organizations that also have some sort of bioremediation to remove some of that. So what we want to do is we want to get the classification of the rivers to start to, if you're familiar with how dirty a river is, the higher the number, the more dirty the river. So we want it to go from 5 to 4 to, if you're 3, you 2B and then 2A, and then 1 is quite impossible because it's jungle. So I hope, so our Green Steps approach is to make everyone accountable for everything that they do. Yeah, it's going to be tough. Yeah.
Anyone else? Questions? Yeah. 1 minute. It'll be not a must, but it'll be good if you can introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm a pharmacist. I've been working with Ministry of Health for quite some time, also being a committee member for pharmacy NGO. So we have had interactions with Ministry of Health with regards to use of antibiotics. And in my first and only meeting with Ministry of Health on the use of antibiotics, I was shocked and horrified to know of the high usage of antibiotics in feed, especially for chicken and other farming feedlots. So if the public were to realize on the discharge that comes from the feedlots, which is near to the water source that we have for Selangor, not KL, Selangor, the biggest population in Klang Valley, I think you will be horrified because the usage of antibiotics is high, and it might cause proliferation of E. coli bacteria that gets more and more insensitive to antibiotics. So rather than, individuals do have a role and do play a role in the pollution of rivers. But I think we should look at industry because industry has a bigger impact when it comes to the pollution of rivers. And I wonder maybe if activists, apart from all the other farming industry associations that were involved in the ministry and some from other healthcare industries, maybe environmental activists would want to join in those discussions because they don't hear from this. They only hear from industries, the Ministry of Health, and the stance would be self-governance from the industry. So I would prefer if grassroots activists actually insert themselves into the conversation because it was shocking and horrifying to me as a pharmacist being in those discussions.
Any comments? Who should shoulder this burden of getting the industry to get the act together?
No, this is an old issue. Is a lot of things coming from industry. It goes back to my argument earlier on. Say enforcement is lacking. This is where selective enforcement is done. As and when there's a crisis, then there's some enforcement. Crisis ends, forget about it. Hanga tai ayam, that sort of issue. So it is not just antibiotic. I know it is a new dimension to the problem, but it's the same thing with palm oil mill waste. So I think we have to be, as citizens, to be more active and push for the politicians that we know of who can influence the thing. Because I think there's nothing, have to take action. But we have to get prepared, united, get the facts together. You see, the other issue has always been, people say, where's your data? So we need to monitor and have the data as well. But as you know, river pollution is always a problem. Takes a long time for you to get the data and a long time for the cleaning up to be occurred. So environmental problem requires a lot of patience. You cannot have overnight solutions. Unless a disaster occurs, then the solution will be temporary, then it's gone again. All I can say.
Anyone? Questions?
I want to add to that conversation a little bit. So what was your name again? And sorry, you're a practicing pharmacist. Are you an activist? No. Can I ask why not? Sorry, is there a law that prevents you from activism? So you cannot be an activist, you cannot be a volunteer. So you cannot volunteer if you're in government service. Okay, so this is interesting, yeah. What I talked about earlier about activism, people give a shit and then expect the NGOs and the other activists to do it, right? So there's more than one way to take action. I did say earlier about telling other people who are not bound by your job, you know, and your professional life, but if you ask any of the activists here, especially the one really long-serving one, we suffer burnout, you know, because there's so few of us who see an issue, care about the issue, and then want to do something about the issue. But in this day and age, collaboration is a really powerful tool. You brought up something that is a long-standing issue. There's one aspect of it that we deal with in river pollution. It's true that KKM has not created room for us to engage with them. Sungai Ara had this same problem. There's a place in Taman Jaja, they had a cow farm, really terribly polluted the river. And then the community there decided, it took them 9 years, including fighting with Lim Guan Eng, using almost 380 letters and engagements for them to completely remove the problem itself. You know, so this is the power of activism. But this has another part because it doesn't just affect rivers, antibiotics, hormones, even our oxidation ponds have E. coli. So the part of the river that I look after, the first part of it is class 1, fantastic. And then you look at the oxidation pond and you look at the treated sewage. And once that happens, the river quality drops to 2B, not safe for skin contact. Kids go in, they get sick, they vomit and stuff like that. So we need a scientific solution to antibiotics, to hormones, to other chemicals that have a really long shelf life, that get into the water system, the food system. But we also need activism. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, before I invite the next question, just to come clean that I work for the government. I work for a wholly owned government institution. So activism is not about being anti-government. It's about helping the government. They have a lot on their plate to highlight what are the pertinent issues, right? And I think Mr. Gurmit made a very good point about sometimes the data is not available, so the onus is on us. You know, like what Kennedy is saying, is to go out there. My friend Peter is always keen on getting the right data. So we have a role to play to get the right data and to highlight to the government what needs to be addressed. Yeah. So it's not about being an anti-government. It's about helping them to prioritize. They have a million and one things, right? They can't, make everyone happy. But it's our job to tell them what's priority. So the next question. I think you have a question. Okay, sorry.
Hi. Thank you very much for the time, for preparing and coming to actually give this talk. My name is Mohan. I actually live in Mont Kiara, Bukit Tungku area. So I'm aware that we have a few patches of green, and I'm looking at every blade of grass, basically. Continue. Now, what I feel, my background is I'm a lawyer. Now, one of the things that I find that needs to be exploited is that a lot of the laws and government institutions rely on many of the legislations, especially with environment, planning, and these are very, very sort of serious and complex issues. It's when you want to take government into task, right? The legal fees, the lawyers available, it's like almost forget it. But I wanted to just create an awareness that when we have like each operation having an ESG, a budget basically, that budget should also be, I think, for services, not only legal, for purely public and environmental and planning. So basically, if there's a law firm or a series of advisors and law firms who are going to take the government to task, take DBKL. Now, recently you may have heard about the Taman Rimba case where it went right up to federal court, and what basically they concluded was what DPKL did was completely against its constitution. Interpreted the act to say there is a need for public engagement, blah, blah, blah. Now, that act basically was funded by private citizens. Now, if we can have a crowdfunding, which we were thinking about, companies that raise monies for legal endeavor to bring governments to task. Because when a government receives a writ, right, or a summons, they cannot keep quiet. And I think the only way to be serious about this is have, because it's impossible. I mean, all of y'all have spent so much of sacrifice and time. I'm sure even people come